And we're live.
Paranormal Spirits, a place to come to get our booze on. We talk about the booze, things that go bump in the night. And I get to do that with all my booze. I'm Mike Black. To my left, my lovely and delicious wife, Alyssa Black.
Greetings.
Sitting directly across from me, best friend, sidekick, confidant.
Lovely and talented.
I think he's going to leave that out.
John Burkett. And tonight we have a continuation of story from the last episode where we talked about the Sallie house and the hauntings that went on there. Tonight we're going to delve into the investigations that lasted for well over a year and brought in some of the biggest names in the business with lots and lots of money that they spent on that. But before we do all that, we're going to talk about all the places you can come to see us on the interwebs. And the first place is...
Interwebs.
In the interwebs.
On the net.
On the net.
On the World Wide Web.
So you can come see us at YouTube at 3B Paranormal Spirits. You can go to Facebook and catch us at Booze with Benefits. You can join up there. It doesn't cost you anything to join. We don't spam you. We do just put stuff about the show on there. We have Instagram, TikTok, and X, and those are all paranormal _dash DASH spelled out _ spirits. You can go check us out at the website. We have our website is paranormal-spirits.com. That's kind of a landing page for us. You can get to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can get to X. And you can also check out our swag store, and that's Boozy's Boutique. And we have really cool shirts there. We have dad caps. We have trucker caps. We have coffee mugs. We got Boozy's koozies to go on your adult beverages. And
speaking of adult beverages,
so
and by the way, go to that YouTube channel, click subscribe.
Yeah. Won't cost you anything.
We won't unless you hit the bell. You won't even get notified. But if you hit the bell, that's cool too. But hit subscribe. Just click.
Yeah, we won't spam you.
And I'm sure if we hit another number of subscribers, another goal, Mike and I'll do something stupid.
am I included in that?
If you want to be.
Sure, if you want to be.
I don't necessarily want to be. I liked our last one because it was fine with me. You were the goobers that had to wear
Racerback tee, and so were we. And we look like beached whales up in here in our Racerback tees.
We hit 1,000 subscribers. We'll go completely shirtless. Just us, though, because YouTube would.
I won't.
I'll tell you what. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll do it topless.
Okay, I'll do a topless at 1,000 subscribers.
Gives us a chance.
Can I wear blinders while y'all do that?
Just yeah, right? Absolutely.
No kidding.
Just kidding.
I have to.
You can wear a blindfold.
But what happens then later though? It hit 10,000. Then
we'll have to up the ante.
We'll
have to figure out something else to do. Maybe we'll have to do it in G-strings or something.
We're sitting.
Well, yeah, we're sitting. Nobody will see anything, so it doesn't really count. So
let's talk about
let's talk about the booze, the BOOZE we're drinking tonight. John and I are drinking
E.H. Taylor small batch, bottled in bond.
Went back to it.
100 proof.
One of the high-end allocated offerings from Buffalo Trace Distillery. And
it's a unicorn.
Fine.
I've got Eagle Rare in my...
Also an allocated higher-end Buffalo Trace product.
But it is not 100 proof.
It's 90. No, it's the same as standard Buffalo Trace.
So I'm better.
But yours is aged 10 years.
Mine's better.
For the bonded label, it only has to be a minimum of 4. But
yeah, not only are we boozing it up tonight, we're bouging it up tonight.
We are.
Quite
bougie.
Allocated Buffalo Trace bottles.
Drinking bougie alcohol.
Are we toasting? I saw him already drink. Are we just drinking to drink?
I think we're just drinking a drink, but
we need to have the rest of the story.
Yeah, Slancha.
Oh, Buffalo Trace Mash Bill #1 is probably my favorite.
That's pretty tasty.
You know,
I'm not a huge Eagle Rare fan usually, but that's pretty good.
Side by side, I'm going to go with Eagle Rare.
Are you?
Yeah.
I like the little bit higher proof point of the Taylor myself.
Yeah, I like the...
Eagle Rare is sweeter.
It is.
I don't ever really drink for the proof point, so... I like the flavor better on the Eagle Rare.
Maybe I'm just being influenced by the way cooler Taylor bottle.
Maybe so.
It is very apothecary style.
Yeah, it's very old school looking.
Listen, y'all scared me out of 100 proof after that Brooklodic. I'm like, bleh.
That Brooklodic was good.
Last
though.
episode you drank 116 proof.
I know, and it about killed me. I mean, it did kill whatever might have ailed me.
Yeah, if you have any,
if I had any
bacteria,
yes, I mean, I think
anything,
I was.
I'm sure
I was
right
yes, I am.
The bourbon doesn't start at like 90. That's your base. I mean, anything below 90 proof is just swill should be poured down. You know.
Yeah, I just think Brooklodic was just a bad day for me. But we need to try some more of those. We've only had the classic laddie.
Yeah,
it'll be fun.
All right, so let's talk about. We talked about the BOOZE that we're drinking tonight. Let's talk about the BOOS.
Let's do.
So in 1994. The paranormal investigation reality TV show Sightings
Back to the Sallie house
made several visits to the Sallie house in Atchison, Kansas. Their investigation would span for over a year, bringing in world-renowned experts in the field of paranormal investigation, such as...
Like who?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Such as Carrie Gaynor from the Entity Bither case. And over $500,000 worth of equipment, and that's 90s money. So today, we're talking $1.03 million of equipment to catch this ghost or spirit or demon or whatever it was.
2 flares and a couple of DVR cameras and
yeah,
5 REM pods.
Oh man, they brought in all kinds of stuff.
That's crazy to me.
So today, the house is 157 years old. At the time, it was 127. The property on which this house sits was purchased by MC Finney. MC was born in Fermoy, Ireland, in 1822, and came to the U.S. in the 1840s. In 1866, at 44 years old, MC bought the property of lots 9 and 10. In 1867, he built the house. MC Finney died at 10 p.m. on September 27th, 1872, and the house still stands today at 508 North 2nd Street, Atchison, Kansas.
Was this Dr. Finney?
No. In our previous episode, we told you the story of how the haunting started for the Pickman family, and that was Tony, Deborah, and their son Taylor who lived in the house. And the family, primarily Tony, had been terrorized by an entity known as Sallie. Supposedly, this was a 7-year-old female. She had scratched, burned, and thrown objects at Tony and other family members. She also moved and rearranged objects, and I'll put a link in the description so that you can check out the previous episode we did about that in the description. And you can just click on it and go right to it.
The little I button.
Yeah. So, Craig Armstrong was a producer for Sightings, and he had heard about a family in this sleepy little Kansas town that was being plagued by this haunting. So he thought it was very interesting and decided that he wanted to look into it. Now, if y'all remember Sightings from way back then, that was one of the very first paranormal investigative type shows out there. They were the ones that kind of started it all.
Before Zach, before Taps.
Yeah, before all those guys, there was Sightings. And Deborah had watched several shows where they had helped others and thought maybe they could help them too. So Craig stated, when we got there, it became real clear to me that we were in for something we were not prepared for. While setting up the cameras, Phil Lampkin, a cameraman for the Sightings team, was startled by an electric static shock that seemed to be swirling around his feet, and they were actually able to catch this static electricity discharging around his legs and his feet and on the floor right there when they were setting up. In Deborah's interview, when they set up the initial interview with Deborah in the kitchen, she had a single red rose, and it was to her left on the windowsill behind her. A little small kitchen. It wasn't a big place. the cameraman, as he's filming Deborah, he pans to the left because she reaches over and picks up a sketch that Tony had drawn of his interpretation of this little ghost girl, Sallie. Now, I'll drop that in the video as well so you can see what he thought she looked like. So he pans over to her, and then he pans back, and it's just a few seconds for her, long enough for her to kind of reach over and then sit back in the chair. By the time they got back, the rose that had been sitting in the windowsill had burnt to a crisp. And Craig said it looked like someone had taken a lighter and just crisped up all the petals without actually touching the rose.
Really?
And so there's going to be a warning, trigger warning right now, and I'll put it right here.
Uh-oh.
There's a particular word that I'm going to use. And the leaves on the rose stem were still not dry. They were moist. So,
I hate you for that.
Well, they were. I mean,
the trigger warning was for Alyssa.
Yes, it was.
So she didn't get to see that, but they'll see it.
You're going to say moist.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about damp?
That's fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the leaves were damp. So anyway, Craig, he was anxious to get Tony on film because Tony is the guy that is being affected by this physically. He's the one that's being scratched and burned and shoved by this entity. So Atchison is a very small town in Kansas, and Tony was afraid of being recognized, and he didn't want to become a target of ridicule. So Tony agreed to be interviewed, but only if he were to be filmed in silhouette. So they filmed him from the side. He's blacked out like a mobster.
Like he's in the witness protection.
I mean, I guess it was a bigger deal back then. I don't know, but I'm thinking now it's like, hey, I don't care.
He said he didn't want to be the laughing stock. Like people in town didn't.
He didn't. And I get that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I don't put on Facebook just because I don't want people to know my whole life,
I really think he thought this was a lot. And the fact that his wife was just like, it's great. I think it really bothered him.
People, look at the podcast we're doing. We don't care.
Yeah, I don't think that. No, I mean, we don't about this, but I mean, there's certain things that I just wouldn't put out there,
Well, yeah. Prayer warriors needed. No. This is cool, though. It should be noted. You can stream YouTube. You can watch the Sallie House episode of Sightings.
Oh, can you?
A few people have it posted up on YouTube.
Yeah. So, anyway, he agrees. You can film me, but you got to do it in silhouette. And as he's describing what he has seen, Craig, the producer, becomes affected by an intense cold that hits his left hand. When it does, Tony says, she's here. And so Craig is holding a thermal camera on Tony the whole time during the interview. So he's kind of sitting here like this.
They had those back then?
Yeah. So anyway, he's holding the thermal cam on him, and all of a sudden his hand starts messing with him. So he passes the camera off to another team member to film this with the thermal cam. And you can see the cold move up his arm and across his chest into his other hand and then over to Tony. And yeah, so as it shoots across there to Tony, all of this was caught on the thermal cam, and Tony winces out in pain. Tony said it felt as if an icy arm had been driven straight through my chest. All of this is still being caught on the thermal and video cameras. Tony's abdomen begins burning. He pulls up his shirt, and as the cameras are still rolling, bleeding scratches with whelps begin appearing across his abdomen.
Oh, yeah, there it is right there.
So they had caught this in real time. And this was the first time that this has ever been documented.
Filmed?
Yeah. So they caught it while it's happening. The camera's rolling, and he pulls up his shirt, and you can see the scratches coming across his belly.
Just a little preview on the YouTube. Like, it's just a little preview, and they're showing that right now.
Yeah. So Craig has decided we're calling this off. We're not doing this interview. He says we're done. And he felt like because they were there, because they were covering the story, because they were bringing light to this, Tony's life was in jeopardy. I mean, he called it off, and he said, Craig said, without a doubt, I knew that it was not a little girl ghost. He knew this was something bad. Mm-hmm. Craig calls his bosses and says, look, we need to call off production. He said, I'm the one that's there. And they, of course, they don't want to do this because this is great. This is going to get views, right? Mm-hmm. Or ratings, I guess, back then. He said, I'm the one that's there seeing the pain in his eyes. I think we should not go back, and I think we should stop. Once they get back with the videotape evidence of all this, they share this video that they did with him getting scratched across his belly with Carrie Gaynor. Now, Carrie Gaynor, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, Carrie is the one that was one of the lead investigators with Barry Taff on the entity or Doris Bither case.
Yeah, the California house.
Doris Bither. And anyway, so he, and that was the summer of 74?
Somewhere around
if I remember right. And we covered that in a previous episode, and I'll leave a description right down there. In the description, there'll be a link, and you can click on it. Carrie poured over the evidence, doing a side-by-side comparison, and approximately 8 minutes apart, that over the period of 8 minutes, you watched as these whelps appeared on his belly. And Carrie said, the exciting thing for me as a researcher is that the camera didn't pull away. It was there the whole time, and that severely reduces the possibility of any kind of hoax.
Yeah.
Most of the cases we come across are playful, mischievous, bizarre, weird, and a lot of them have just normal, natural explanations. This case, it involves scratch marks. This seems a little more frightening and something that we should be a little more cautious about in terms of studying the phenomenon. So he was impressed by it. And this dude had thousands and thousands of hours of paranormal investigation under his belt. There were family photos that were presented to the sighting teams, and then I'll drop those in the video as we're talking through this. But there were family photos that were presented to the sighting teams, and these photos had blurring and light phenomenon that actually confounded the photo experts that were brought in to investigate and examine them. They didn't know why they were like they were. They couldn't explain it. They said, we don't know what it is. On a subsequent session at the house, the sightings teams brought in another paranormal investigator, and this is Al Rober, to get additional hard data at the site. Many team members actually felt cold spots when they were moving through the house, and this was over and over that they were running into these cold spots. Interestingly, as these manifestations of cold were usually followed by Tony being harmed by the scratches. Tony said during the second set of interviews, this whole spirit thing scares me. He said it's just some of the things she's done, referring she being Sallie. She's lit fires. I think if she wants to hurt me, why couldn't she just light me on fire?
Shouldn't say that.
Oh,
he said she does.
Y'all saw Hereditary. Don't ever say that.
Yeah, like she does to some of the other things around here. He said, but yeah, this is as far as it goes, referring to the scratches. He said, that's all she does to me. The shows and the glass breaking, that kind of stuff. So Al Rober was asked what he would recommend in this situation. Al said, one of the things I would tell you would be to try to document some more of these things as much as they can. I would certainly recommend them to get rid of the toys in the corner and get rid of any encouragement that is now going on for this little girl ghost. Because he's saying all you're doing is promoting this.
Sounds like priest time.
Well, you think about it. So let's say this isn't a little girl ghost. This is a demon that they've got. And they've put a special place.
Is it
I don't know if it's Pazuzu or not, but it's probably a demon. So this thing, they've given it a special corner, and they've given it gifts and placed it there, special gifts just for them. So basically, they've created an altar.
You've created a Sallie port.
Oh my gosh, that's actually pretty good. I'm gonna give you that. That's actually pretty good. You have to admit that was pretty
for
good.
her to come into this.
Sallie port. They created a Sallie port. I'll give you that one.
I thought that was funny.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you that one, bro.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay.
It's his fault. He's the one who kept referring to the Sallie port at the PHC.
That's true. We didn't. I know. I'd never heard. I don't think I'd heard that word, or if I had, it'd been a long time
until he kept talking about the Sallie port.
Oh, he used to call it that when we worked there.
That's what it is. It's a
I
Sallie
realize
port.
it is. It's
Okay.
just.
So
Surprised Sallie didn't show up to that Sallie port. It's like a portal for Sallie.
Oh my god.
but they had essentially created an altar for this chick. I mean,
It's
they
not
really
really
did.
much different than you might as well just bring a fucking Ouija board in there anyway. Right?
Now, yeah. So on another occasion, famous psychic Peter James. What?
They invited it
Yeah, for sure.
to stay.
Yeah, we love you. Stay here.
Thanks, Karen. No, wait, Deborah.
Deborah.
Thanks, Debbie.
Karen's a sister.
Karen's the sister.
Karen would have never allowed this thing to stay.
No, she would not.
Karen would have asked to talk
Karen
to the
would've-
manager immediately.
Yes. Karen would have told her sister, "Stop it, stop it."
Karen would have called the HOA and
She
told them,
would have.
hey, they have a ghost
Exactly.
in their house and that's not allowed here.
Somebody come take it away.
So another occasion, a famous psychic, Peter James, was brought into the investigation. And Peter had no knowledge. He had thousands of hours as well investigating. And he had no knowledge of the case coming in. But before Peter even stepped into the house, as he's walking up, he looks up and he sees the face of a little girl that's looking out of the second floor window where the nursery was.
I can't.
Yeah. So upon entering the house,
Peter
Peter's-
James has an awesome mustache, by the way, or he did back in
amazing
the 90s.
mustache. I'll
Amazing
post a picture of him
mustache,
with his mustache there. That is,
Mustache.
yeah, it is a great stash, man. It's like that's
It is
that's
Magnum PI level.
a prawn star.
He's got Selleck
mustache.
stash.
Yeah, he does. So upon entering the house, Peter sees a little girl at the top of the stairs, and he calls out to her. He says, "Hello, hello, hello, Sally. Is that your name?"
Oh no.
And so Deborah is completely stoked because Peter saw Sally.
I cannot with Debbie.
Debbie
is killing me.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the former residents of the house who remained anonymous in some of the films that I saw, she had lived there for about 8 months and was interviewed for during this investigation, and she talked about how her daughter Heather would talk to her imaginary friend. I'll give you 3 guesses what her friend's name was.
Sally.
Her imaginary
Sallie.
friend's name was Sally. She said, I lived there about 3 years ago with my 3 children, and we lived here for about 8 months. The whole time we lived here, my daughter was 5 at the time. She had an imaginary friend named Sally. I'd scold Heather. I would scold her for something and she would come back and tell me, I didn't do that. Sally did it. Or Sally told me to do it. So another former resident of the home, Kelly Elias, I did reach out to Kelly. She did not respond. Spoke to the interviewers.
Did you really?
I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she didn't respond.
I would reach out to Deborah. I can see why he would tolerate it. Deborah's pretty 90s hot.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get why Tony tolerated it. I mean, pretty good
sad.
looking. Pretty good looking lady.
So another former resident of the home, Kelly Elias, spoke up to the interviewers of the sightings team, and this is what she had to say. I'd spent years here and here, and she motions to the wall there, is the bookcase, and my grandmother had all of her medical books in there. The room, which is now the nursery, was actually my 2 youngest brothers' room, and I used to pass by this room. One day I saw something that caught my eye. I turned around and looked, and here against the wall, next to the window, it was on fire. There is no electrical outlet or anything. it was only concentrated right there. And she was pointing to the windowsill. And now we know that Sallie likes to set stuff on fire.
Just
and
the
burn
windowsill where the roses caught.
This is upstairs in the nursery. The windowsill where the rose was crisped up was down in the kitchen. I always kind of had that feeling of being watched all those years that I lived there. So going back to Peter, this is during his initial walkthrough and everything. And Peter gets up to the nursery, and he felt as if something were trying to keep him out. He said, "I'm getting a lot of resistance right here at the door," meaning whatever is in the room wants me out. As Peter was telling the entity in the room that he was not afraid of it, and he was standing there at the door, and he's going, "I'm not afraid of you." And so Tony is walking along with him as he's doing his walkthrough, and Tony feels this rush of wind go past him, and he gets a burning sensation on his back, not his sciatic. On his back, he gets this burning sensation. And so they go over there, and Peter hasn't been told about the scratching stuff. He hadn't been told anything about this house. So he thinks Tony just has a case of the nerves, right? And so they pull up Tony's shirt, and they look at his back. On his lower back was scratched the letters MC. Remember who built the house?
MC
Finney built the house.
And DJ O'Toole.
Yeah. Peter experienced an electrical shock on his wrist immediately thereafter. The shock was actually heard by the Pickmans who were following him around.
This thing is after Tony.
Yeah. Doesn't like males. The shock was heard by Pickmans and the sightings team. They all heard this crackle electric shock that hit Peter in his wrist. He said that he felt at least 3 people had died in the house. This is what Peter said. And that something to do with medical, or the medical field was involved. So if we look at the history of the house, where he had the MC Finney scratch on his back, and a year before Michael or MC Finney built the house on 2nd Street, he and Catherine Finney had a boy named Charles Finney. Charles was born on February 1st, 1865. He grew up and became an Olympic gold medalist couples ice skater. Say that 3 times fast.
Olympic gold medalist couples ice skater.
No, you didn't really have to. And later became a doctor and the mayor of Atchison.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was an accomplished Irishman.
I mean,
look at that.
Dude had it going on.
You got a gold medalist, a doctor,
Yeah.
and mayor.
Oh, it gets better. So Charles would often perform his skating routine in drag.
And way ahead of his time.
Ahead of,
Nowadays, he'd be
no
the
big deal.
toast
Yeah,
of the
nobody
town.
paid any
Toast
attention.
of the town. You're so brave.
Oh, you're so brave for coming out and doing your
Oh my God.
routine in drag. But back then, it was quite a...
Of course, to be fair, all male ice skaters for the last, as long as I can remember, are essentially dressed in drag with all the sequins and stuff. I mean, it's
Because they're flashy, but they're they have roles.
fine line between Elvis and Liberace and ice skaters.
Okay, moving on before we get completely canceled. Under the name, Charles would often perform his skating routine in drag under the name of Miss Colby of Baltimore. So he sets up with a local skating rink. He sets up this performance he's going to do. And they are very well aware he's going to be doing this in drag. He performed for the town, drawing in quite a crowd. And he got half the door, and they paid him some little pittance of something to do this to begin with.
A trailblazer.
Yeah. So,
I mean, seriously.
yeah. When it got out, though, to the townspeople that they had been duped, they were not happy with...
Just claim it's kabuki.
They were not happy with Charles. He was later elected mayor in 1914, but lost his office 2 years later. Now, guess what he lost his office for?
Dressed in drag.
No. He lost his office for
Draft
selling...
dodging.
No, he lost his office for selling alcohol at the local Eagles Lodge.
It's 1916, right? That's legal. That's pre-prohibition.
Yeah.
Prohibition was until 1920.
Apparently not at the Eagles Lodge. It wasn't.
Not the Eagles Lodge.
Huh.
And so it was kind of there were a lot of people against drinking in Kansas at that time. I mean,
everywhere. I mean, that's why prohibition was able to
right.
pass. Thank God it was repealed.
Oh,
right?
thank you. Saints be praised.
Let's not go
or
back
we would
there.
not have E.H. Taylor and Eagle
I'm
Rare.
kinda
And
side
he lost his office for selling alcohol. Never did get it back.
Tisk.
Yeah. He was also, he got in trouble for some fisticuffs. Somebody accused him of stealing someone's pocketbook.
And he whooped her ass.
There was a threat of that and a gun pulled and some other stuff.
Wow.
This guy's pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah, he was quite the trailblazer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Intense.
he would be hailed as a Renaissance man now.
Yeah, I would have hung out with him for sure.
Yeah.
So, according to town records, there was a Sallie that lived at the house, but she did not die there. And also worth noting, at the time of the hauntings when the Pickmans were there, Sallie was still alive. That particular Sallie.
The Sallie that we think is... Okay, I'm going to let you continue.
There was a Sallie in the house, okay?
Right.
And that lived there for a little while, but she did not die in the house. And at the time of the Pickmans, she was still alive.
We're not talking about Sally Thomas, though, or...
Gotcha.
Moving on. So...
I don't want to give anything away.
No. So one of the places that the Sallie legend may have originated from. Now, this is completely an unsubstantiated event. So there's no records of this. This is completely myth.
This is the...
Yeah, it's completely myth, and there's no record of it. Dr. Charles Finney, the
Olympic
drag
gold medalist, drag queen,
so he
All those
mayor,
things, yes.
and doctor,
and bootlegger. Charles used the whole bottom floor of his house at 508 North 2nd Street for his medical practice. The front served as office space and examinations room. God, I can't talk. I think it's a liquor. Examination rooms, while the doctor and his wife and son lived upstairs. Although no records of a patient named Sallie exist in Dr. Finney's records, as the story goes, one day a frantic mother came running into the office holding her 6-year-old daughter, Sallie. The child was in severe abdominal pain. Dr. Finney diagnosed appendicitis, and believing the appendix would soon burst, immediately began surgery.
Before the anesthetic had kicked in, which would have been ether back in the day. That's pretty much all they had.
He grabbed his scalpel and began cutting Sallie before the anesthesia had taken full effect. Sallie's screams resonated through the block and then suddenly stopped. She died on the operating table, her last memories believing a man was torturing her. So she thought he was torturing her as she died, which is horrible. What a horrible way to die. Like I say, this is unsubstantiated. This is completely myth. This is one of those stories that's been told over the years. So it may or may not be true. I mean,
that is something that could create a traumatic stain on the place.
Absolutely, for sure.
A psychic,
a
psychic scar.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that's seldom ever mentioned is that, you remember when I talked about MC Finney buying the property? Well, MC Finney bought 2 lots, 9 and 10, which became 504 and 508 North 2nd Street. 508 is the Sallie house.
Mm-hmm.
The house next door, 504 North 2nd Street, was also owned by MC Finney. Now, this house, directly next door to Dr. Finney's house, could be connected to the Sallie house hauntings, because the house was built in 1889.
Shit, they're 10 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
You can reach out the window in one, touch the other one. They're like a modern day suburban subdivision.
Yeah.
So close.
So it was built in 1889 by James Finney, who is the older brother of Charles. James deeded it to a woman named Johanna.
Oh, Johanna, like at Bobby Mackey's
Bobby
Music
Mackey,
World.
yeah. It's spelled Johanna. Pronounce it how you will, but I'm going to call her Johanna. Johanna Barnes, a divorced mother of 3 and pregnant with a 4th child. Johanna had been previously institutionalized as, and I'm going to use air quotes, violently insane, and gave birth in 1889 to Frank Barnes. And this is while she was institutionalized. So she gave birth in the hospital to Frank, the 4th child. Eventually, she was released to the care of Dr. Finney and returned to the house next door to him. On September 24th, 1906, so this is a few years later, Johanna attempted to remove herself from the
Gene pool,
physical plane.
Unaliving.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all are so talented at remembering how to say those things. I am not.
Self-deletion.
Yeah. So she turned on the gas stove. That's surprising. They had gas in 1906 in the middle of Kansas. To me,
probably like an LP tank out, like
yeah.
I
don't know, but it was there. And she turned on the gas stove and laid down with Frank, who is now 5 years old. Both were overcome by fumes. Johanna survived. 5-year-old Frank did not.
Oh. So that's a attempted self-deletion and a murder.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to her after that. I couldn't find any other documentation.
She's probably haunting one of these insane asylums.
I don't know, but I mean...
sanitariums.
But she did try to take herself out of the physical plane, and she accomplished that with her son, which is horrible.
That's awful.
There's all kinds of newspaper articles that I read through, and they weren't very...
you know where they messed up? She needed a match.
Right.
Boom.
So Deborah finally realizes that what Tony had known all along, that this was not the spirit of a little girl. This was something much darker, uglier, and several attempts were made to cleanse the house. Multiple exorcisms were also performed. During one such exorcism, Tony was scratched 11 separate times.
Why was he there?
Deborah and Tony and Taylor left the house. They got out of there in 1994. So they were there about 2 years. But Tony shared with an author later, he said, and the continuing is a quote here. It's quite lengthy. My wife's experiences and my own experiences were 2 very different ones. She experienced the nice side of things, and mostly because she openly accepted that what was in our house was a little girl. With my Catholic upbringing, I had a very different take on our earliest experiences and didn't want anything to do with it. For this reason, the entity in our house tried other ways to gain my acceptance. An innocent little girl, then showing itself as my wife, then a matronly older woman, or perhaps to scare me into accepting it. When I resisted these, it began another game and infiltrated my dreams, my thoughts, emotions, etc. This was just the start. It was more physical and much worse over the years since leaving the house, because we only stayed there 22 months. We investigated the house ourselves, as well as other locations. All in all, we learned a lot. At times, we're still bothered by these entities, but we have become used to identifying them and when they are around, and that is half the battle. Would we want to experience it again? Likely not, as it definitely has taken a toll on us. Why the hell, and I asked myself, if you had been attacked like he was, why would you go back and investigate this same house?
Well, you want answers to.
I don't care.
And I thought about that.
And why did it only try the child and the hag, but it skipped right past the whore, the succubus.
I don't know. But I thought about this, and I thought about my own experience in a couple of haunted houses, and then the one in particular that really kind of spurred me to go. And I was absolutely, completely terrified in the house that I lived in Seagoville. Mm-hmm. I mean, completely terrified, and yet I spent a good portion of my life chasing this stuff down, trying to get pictures and EVPs. And
I don't think anybody who never had a previous experience really goes into this field.
It's kind of like once it's happened to you, you go chase it.
Because before it happens to you, you probably don't believe in it.
Right. I don't know. But I think it's very interesting that he did this. And I thought, how can you do that? And yet I did the same thing. Mine wasn't as traumatic as his. I did get scratched and burned and all that good stuff. But
yeah, but we both had several. That's why we're interested in this stuff. If we
right.
hadn't had any, we're just like, oh, these crazy motherfuckers. What the hell?
Yeah. Right.
But we've lived it. And having lived it, then you know that it's real and you want to know more. It's kind of like
absolutely.
It's like me chasing that Bigfoot that I've never seen.
Yeah.
And if I saw one, then I want to see like 5 more.
What are the odds of that? I mean,
pretty slim. Most people never have that many encounters. But it's like our UFOs.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple, 3.
One recent, so.
What do you think?
You didn't grow up with any experiences or anything. You didn't have any until he dragged you along to a haunted place.
Correct.
And
It
made
scared
you see
the crap out of me. But I didn't think that everybody I just didn't imagine that many people had imagined. The people that I had talked to, I was surrounded by people who didn't believe in it. But the more
about
people
half the population of this country believes it. 60%, something like
right.
that.
Well, the more people I spoke to and realized that they had all had experiences, I was like, this many people could not have imagined these things. So it wasn't that I've ever thought that everybody that saw it thought they saw it was crazy. I've never thought that. But
there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophies, Horatio.
I don't think I would be going after in the same house something that had attacked me, though.
I would be trying to get it out of my house if it had been negative type thing.
Well, because I think one thing I'm always afraid of is getting something attached to me. So if it really hated him enough that it could then follow him somewhere, which I think it was attached to the house, but it hated him.
I think, honestly, what happened was that Deborah wanted it. She asked for it.
She created an altar to it, which basically created the Sallie port.
And
she might as well have just brought it to Ouija board. That's the same
thing.
thing.
Tony called bullshit on this thing from the get-go. And he's like, you're not what you pretend to be.
It's a good thing you're 90s hot.
And
I'd be out of here.
So, but I think that, and what really got me was, and I've seen interviews with Deborah, and she seems genuinely disappointed in herself.
She really does.
See, I haven't seen any recent. I should point out that I only know what she looked like on the original sightings episode in the early 90s.
I think she genuinely
might be a rough life since then, but
not that. I
think she's genuinely repentant that she sided with the little girl rather than Tony.
Basically, that she didn't listen and pay attention to her husband.
She didn't realize the trauma
and how badly he was being injured emotionally and physically.
Physically and mentally and emotionally.
So now, I'm sure that I've seen it, so now I got to go back and watch. Somewhere I saw this picture, the picture of Sallie, like she just showed me.
Yeah, like I say, I'm going to put it up in
I've seen it before.
The video.
I've seen it before multiple times. So now I got to go back and see what Zach found in that house.
I'm sure it was a demon. Because that's all he finds.
Hey, and if this had gone down, if it hadn't been the 90s, if this had gone down in the 80s or 70s, the Warrens, I'm sure would have gone in there and declared
absolutely
a demonic oppression.
Absolutely. For sure they would.
But they call it the Demon House now, the Sallie Demon House.
Oh, they do? I haven't seen the Sallie Demon House. I've just seen the Sallie House.
Everybody refers to it as the Demon House.
Or the Pickman haunting, you know. But, I mean, they stuck it out 2 years, and then they hauled ass and got out of there. But
I'm surprised it took 2 years to get to the point of what it was.
I don't know. It would have...
It took George Lutz less than 6 months to sell his house.
Yeah, he wouldn't... He was out of there in less than...
It was quick.
He was less than 60 days. They were there a month-ish.
Yeah, well, even in the 70s, the monthly nut on $800,000 is a lot of goddamn money.
And I know
yeah, I'm sure.
And I know that it didn't hurt the child, but that's what I would be afraid of.
Holy crap.
Like, I'm not going to stay there and risk that. I'm just not.
I mean, yeah, I don't know what his options were. Obviously, he was close with his parents because they lived close enough to where he could go like on weekend visits all the time. And because it's mentioned several times within here, they were just about to go to the parents' house or they had just gotten back from the parents' house. So,
well, I get scratched and something throws an oil lamp across the room, a few things like that. It's spiritual warfare time.
I'm out.
I might not be out, but I'm declaring war. And I'm bringing in the big guns.
Yeah,
I'm not letting my 90s hot wife put an altar to this thing in the corner.
Yeah, that's messed up. Mm-mm.
No, we're bringing in a Catholic priest. We're bringing in a non-denominational healing. Bring snake handlers in. I don't care. We're bringing in Wiccans.
Well, all
of them.
You know, I think that
Native American,
whatever, to get rid of this thing. But that's the thing that got me.
Goofer dust around every goddamn door.
I felt like that she didn't, like the old Tammy Wynette song, Stand By Your Man. I don't think she did during that time period.
Or she could have been influenced by this thing. It could have been an influence on her.
It could have been. However,
I mean, if you're going to go so far as to call it a demon house.
I'm going to demonize her for not standing by her man. And even she says...
She could have been under influence.
She could have been.
If this is truly a demonic, and you know how I feel about that, but it's
just a name, is all it is.
But that kind of entity,
it
can have a negative influence on people. It can also influence people in their favor. It could be influencing her to invite it in to make it,
Yeah,
and then attacking him because he's anti-Sallie.
She played on her emotions because she pretended to be a little girl. I don't think it was ever a little girl.
I think that psychic led him wrong to begin with.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like, that
should have brought. They should have brought. But the mustache saw the same thing. But
here's the thing, though: did this thing, whatever this thing was, did it portray itself as a little girl to everyone? Except Tony.
Zach would know.
And it probably did, but I have
the hot psychic medium chick. Would know.
If they'd have brought Cindy Kays in, she'd have it all sussed out.
Oh my God!
You're
such a horn
bringing
dog.
her and DJ Prozac, they'll have it all sorted out.
I've never seen them though, where they're like, yes, play into the ghost, let them stay here, give them gifts.
Yeah, that
I don't. I've never.
Or it could be that person was not a real psychic and was just full of shit.
And that very well could have been. Well, but I know that...
But she's not the only one that says little girl.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Mustache said, Selleck said that too. But
I know that in the houses I've lived in, especially the second haunted house I lived in, the more that we talked about it, the more that we gave...
It power, right?
It energy, fed it, our attention, if nothing else.
It was the same thing with mine, too. Like, once it was just myself and the cats in the house, and I didn't really talk about it other than to acknowledge it. It was no more than a shadow passing down the hall occasionally in the corner of my eye.
But once you start talking about it, once you start giving it energy, and the same thing happened to me, in the house that I lived in. Once you start giving that thing energy, once you start paying attention to it, once you start noticing it, and like me, challenging it. Hey, if you can do this, won't you do that? That kind of thing.
Right.
And then that's when everything just blew up, started happening.
My ex-wife, Oh my God, it's so haunted in here.
To what?
I shouldn't say I'm making fun of her accent.
Who?
My ex-wife.
Oh, your ex-wife?
Yeah. Oh my God, that ghost is big as Dallas.
Is she got a real strong accent like that? Worse than mine?
Yeah.
Really?
Worse than ours, yeah.
Oh my God.
Like to the point where
'Cause
I hear it.
I'm country AF and I know it.
Yeah, and I sound like that too, I'm sure, but yeah.
Oh, shut up. Just shut up.
Okay.
What? I didn't live in Minnesota that long.
Oh, you know what's really funny? It's when she talks about her MOM. Say it.
You want me to say it like
want you
how
to
I used to say it?
Yeah.
Mom. My mom.
Mom.
My mom.
Do you have a pen? I can sign something.
It would come out when we first met. She would
Mom.
talk about her mom. And she'd
Can
be
we
like,
get
My mom.
some
Well, I hadn't been
some
back
oil?
that long.
okay.
Can we boil?
All right,
some
we're getting
oil?
way off task and
I
track
will
here.
say this though: if the psychic had been right and it was only a little girl, obviously this probably would not have been turned out the way that it did. Doubtful it would have anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, plenty of. I mean, everybody talks about this place. Everybody has experiences.
People have visited and been scratched and burned.
Since then?
Yes,
Oh, really?
yes. There
Zach
have been
probably
reports.
got scratched.
Do y'all want to go there?
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah, that's a long way to Kansas.
I
There's
mean,
plenty
yeah,
of haunted
there'd have
places
to be.
around here.
There's got to be other stuff happening around there.
There is.
Kansas style barbecue, maybe is where. I mean, you got to throw some other stuff.
Amelia
in.
Earhart. There's another really big
Snooze.
haunted house there.
Yeah, there's an Amelia Earhart birthplace museum, like right down the street from the
No,
Sallie
there's
house.
another
but-
place that's haunted that's there.
I think that this place was really haunted. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was a little girl. I think it was something else. What do you think? Little girl?
Obviously, it was something else.
Something else?
I think it was something else. We never
they
got.
proved it was
I've
something
never
else.
heard of anything of how that other thing came to be.
Right.
But I can see how it could influence Debbie.
Probably somebody with a Ouija board.
Probably.
Maybe, who knows? I mean, could be something tied to the land. I mean, we're talking about.
So we're not going to Kansas anytime in the near future.
Oh man,
Alrighty.
I'd rather go to Oz.
Well, y'all
Go where
decide
they-
for yourselves if you would like to go to Kansas and check out the Sallie house.
Check out some E.H. Taylor small batch.
Bottled and bond.
Bottled and bond if you can get it, because that's like a unicorn that's
good
really hard to
luck.
find.
Hard
But
enough
if you
to
can
find
find it, get it. 10-year expression of Eagle Rare, definitely get that because you can find that.
Well,
Easy. Well, it's
isn't
easier
that
than
easy?
it's easier than E.H. Taylor.
I've never seen this in a store
Oh, really?
ever in person ever.
I know that I have seen it and I've drank it before, so I know I've gotten it before.
You
but
got a whole unopened bottle in there too. Yeah.
yeah,
You're doing
Well,
good.
no, I have a non-age expression.
Really?
It's a blend that I have in there. That's the 10-year.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
all right, y'all have a good night.
Nighty night.
All right.
Bye bye.
Don't let the